Coffee plants love high altitudes. The altitude helps to produce more elegant, complex flavors in the coffee cherries which contain the beans. The fruit must be hand-picked from trees, which can bear flowers, green fruit, and ripe cherries all at the same time, which is why very, very specific hand-picking techniques are the most effective. The outer pulp and parchment of the coffee cherry are removed to reveal two beans, which are then cleaned, dried, graded, and then hand sorted. The beans range in color from pale green to dark yellow when raw. They are exported in their raw state for roasting, blending, and grinding at their final destination. The different types of coffees that come from this process are as follows. Firstly, instant coffee. This is a powder made from a freshly brewed coffee that is then heat dried. Freeze-dried coffee. This term is used to describe brewed coffee that has been frozen into a slush before the water is evaporated. Normally it is more expensive than instant coffee because it has a superior flavor. Then we have decaffeinated coffee. This is a coffee produced whereby the caffeine is removed from the beans before roasting via the use of carbon dioxide or a chemical solvent, which completely disappears when the beans are roasted. Also, the Swiss water process, which steams the bean and then scrapes off the caffeine-laden outer layers, is another way to make decaffeinated coffee. These are some of the types of coffee in addition to the one that we are used to, which is ground fresh from the bean. Is decaffeinated coffee? Well, to answer that question, we first have to understand what is caffeine. Caffeine is a crystalline compound that is found in tea and coffee plants and is a stimulant of the central nervous system. That is why when we drink beverages with caffeine in them, we feel a certain burst of energy and mental stimulation. Caffeine is the element that is responsible for this effect. Caffeine has no aroma or smell. It is slightly bitter in taste, and it is in fact a natural pesticide, meaning that it has a built-in compound that destroys insects that are harmful to these precious plants. What is important to understand is that caffeine is a natural thing. It's naturally evident in tea and coffee plants. However, some people prefer having the taste of delicious coffee but without the stimulant, and we call this decaffeinated coffee. Let's have a look at the process of how coffee can be decaffeinated. The process of removing the natural caffeine in a coffee bean is often asked about, and guests often want an explanation of how it is done, why it is done, and the effect that it has on the coffee. It can be quite a complicated explanation, so it is very important to understand the basics. There are three different processes which are used today to remove caffeine from the coffee bean. Firstly, the solvent or traditional process. Secondly, the Swiss water process. And thirdly, the carbon dioxide or CO2 process. All decaffeinating processes are done when the coffee beans are in their green state and never while they are cherries. It is also never done after roasting. So let's look at these three methods very, very quickly. The solvent or traditional process is the oldest and most common method of decaffeination. What happens is the green beans are steamed to open their pores. Then the green beans are soaked in an organic solvent which bonds with the caffeine. Then the green beans are steamed again to remove the solvent residues and hence the caffeine in the bean. The Swiss water process is used due to the fact that it is environmentally friendly. It's chemical free and referred to as the water-only process. This process uses the following steps. Firstly, the green beans are soaked in very hot water. The water is then filtered or percolated through activated or charged charcoal, which removes the caffeine. Then the green beans are returned to the hot water and the beans reabsorb the flavor substances from the water, but this time without the caffeine. The final method is the carbon dioxide process. This method uses two natural elements, pure water and carbon dioxide. Together, this makes a sparkling water, which effectively extracts the caffeine from the coffee beans. This works due to the fact that when carbon dioxide is compressed, it can behave partly as a liquid and partly as a gas, and can also selectively bond with caffeine. Firstly, the green beans are steamed to open their pores. Then, the green beans are covered in compressed carbon dioxide. The compressed carbon dioxide and the green beans are then filtered or percolated through activated charcoal, which removes the carbon dioxide which is bonded with the caffeine. The flavor substances never leave the green bean. Only the caffeine leaves the bean, so no reabsorbing needs to take place. This is a very quick look at the 3 processes that are used to decaffeinate coffee. They are effective in removing caffeine from the coffee bean. The other question that you often may be asked is the amount of caffeine found in a cup of coffee. And a good rule of thumb to follow is that light roasted coffee has the maximum caffeine, while dark roasted coffee has less caffeine. Also, the longer the extraction time, the more caffeine will be found in the cup. So, the use of a plunger method, which has a long extraction time, has more caffeine, while the use of the espresso machine, which is a short extraction time, has less caffeine. This can seem like quite complicated stuff, but it's very, very important for you to know this so that when your guests ask you about caffeine and coffee, you can respond confidently. But remember that there are 3 different ways to remove caffeine from coffee, and also remember that the lighter the roast, the more caffeine, and the darker the roast, the less caffeine. Good luck at understanding caffeine and decaffeinated coffee. Understanding espresso. Espresso is derived from the Italian word for express, which is essentially what espresso is, a coffee that is made quickly and served immediately to the guest. This type of coffee is brewed by forcing hot water through finely ground coffee beans. This produces a sweet, thick, rich, and smooth shot of espresso. Espresso should look thick and syrupy, like warm honey being poured from a spoon when it drips out of the portafilter, and it needs to be a rich, dark chocolate brown in color. It should also always end with a crema, which is the thin, creamy, golden layer of foam that makes up 10 to 30% of what we understand as espresso. The measurements of an espresso need to be accurate in order to ensure the perfect espresso is achieved every time. Depending on the portafilter basket that your establishment uses, you may or may not need to measure the following out, as the baskets will set a guideline for you. However, it is still very important to know how many grams of ground coffee it takes to make a single and a double espresso. So, let's have a look at the following. A single espresso is made with between 7 and 9 grams of ground coffee, resulting in a single shot of 30 milliliters. A double espresso is made with between 14 and 18 grams of ground coffee, resulting in a double shot of 60 milliliters. The principle of consistency is key here. Whatever you do when dosing and tamping at your establishment must remain standard for all of the coffees that you make. Even getting it 1 or 2 grams off between coffees can completely change the flavor. So we need to be accurate and consistent in order to make the perfect espresso. Making a shot of espresso may seem simple and easy, but it is in fact somewhat complicated and can be quite complex at times. It's very easy to make a bad or average espresso, but it takes time, concentration and practice to make an excellent espresso. Espresso is the reason why people drink cappuccinos, why they drink lattes, americanos, mochas, and macchiatos. It has very little to do with the taste of the milk and almost everything to do with the taste of the espresso. There are several important steps in pulling an espresso shot. It begins with the grinder and progresses to the dosing, tamping, and water pressure. Set the grinder to the desired level of grind, and grind only what you need for that specific order. A good extraction is characterized by a 3 to 5 second delay before any coffee pours out. Heavy droplets will appear and develop into a thick, straight, and even pour. The color will be dark and chocolatey. The pour should be cut off before the color lightens and the pour begins to curl in. There are three main factors to controlling the extraction. Firstly, the grind. Secondly, the dose. And thirdly, the tamp. Let's have a look at these three elements. Even if you have developed a consistent dosing and tamping technique, extraction will be controlled by adjusting the grind settings. The dry grounds should look like caster sugar, fine yet granular. Use the filter basket as a guide. The grounds should be slightly larger than the perforations that you can see in the filter basket. If extraction is too rapid, this tells you that your grind needs to be finer. If the extraction is too slow, then the grind needs to be coarsened. Be sure to only make small adjustments, just one notch on the adjustment collar at a time. Always remove the grounds in the old setting before adjusting. And remember, temperature, humidity, and the wearing of the burrs in the grinder can affect the accuracy of the grind setting. Adjustments need to be made to control the rate of extraction. Now let's look at the dose. The dose is the volume of grounds required in the basket of the portafilter to produce the espresso. Machine baskets have a reference line that the grounds, once tamped, should cover. There should be about 1 millimeter between the packed coffee and the shower foil. This allows the hot water to settle over the pack or puck, thereby drawing out all the flavor and allowing enough room for the grounds to swell. Too little coffee in the handle makes it too easy for the hot water to flow through. Hence, a lot of the good flavor in the grounds will not have been extracted. Too much coffee in the handle makes it too difficult for the water to flow. Without room for the water to settle over the pack, the water will penetrate unevenly and the good flavor will not be extracted properly. For the sake of freshness, every coffee maker needs to know how to grind to order. This means getting the right amount of ground coffee into the portafilter basket. Always ensure that you dose consistently. Remember to work between 7 and 9 grams for a single espresso and 14 to 18 grams for a double espresso. Now let's dose. Step 1. Clean and dry the portafilter basket with a dry cloth before starting. Step 2. Turn on the grinder. It's important to remember to heat your cups up beforehand, either by keeping them on the heat tray or by placing hot water in the cups while you grind, dose and tamp, and then throwing it out before you pull a shot. This way your guest's coffee will be hot and fresh. Step 3 is to place the portafilter handle with basket underneath the dosing chamber. Place the handle on the portafilter rest of the grinder and begin to dose coffee into the basket by pulling the dosing lever towards you. Step 4. Fill the portafilter basket with ground coffee. Remember, there should be a mound or small hill of coffee in the basket. Step 5. Use a stir stick, the handle of a spoon, or a clean finger to evenly spread the coffee in the basket. Be sure that when evening out the coffee to not be wasteful. Work cleverly and cleanly. Now let's look at tamping. Tamping is to apply firm pressure and even pressure on the dose using the metal implement called the tamper. After the dose has been done, we need to make the ground coffee into a puck or packed coffee. We do this by tamping. The compressed dose offers resistance to the highly pressurized water that is about to settle on it. Always be sure to tamp consistently, using the same amount of pressure to tamp for every single shot. Let's go back to the process. Step 6. With the portafilter steadily resting on the tamp mat, lightly use the tamper to push the coffee grounds into the basket. Remember, the focus is on an even and steady amount of pressure. Step 7. Use the tamper again, this time pressing harder and with more force to compress the coffee. Step 8. Now we are ready to polish. Gently polish your ground coffee puck twice. Step 9. Wipe any excess grounds from the wings and the rim of the portafilter. Now we are ready for the exciting part that all the preparation has led up to. We are ready to pull a shot of espresso. Step 10 is to run hot water through the group head on the espresso machine to get rid of loose coffee grounds and to stabilize the water temperature. This is often referred to as dropping a shot. Step 11, now you can turn off the group head. Step 12, insert the portafilter and immediately start the group head. Do not let the portafilter sit in the group head, as this will burn the coffee grounds. Rather, insert and immediately start. Step 13, place the coffee cups under the portafilter. Once you have turned on the group head with the portafilter basket in place, you have a few critical seconds to get to step number 15. Step 14, turn off the group head after 25 seconds. Step 15, there should be 30 milliliters of espresso in the coffee cup. 60 milliliters for a double shot, and remember the espresso should have a golden browned crema head on top of it. Only grind enough coffee for the espresso shot you are making. This keeps it as fresh as possible. Make sure the portafilter spouts are clean and free from grinds. Always wipe out the portafilter basket with a dry cloth after knocking out the previous espresso puck and before dosing a new shot. Always use the tamp mat when tamping. Make sure the tamper is always dry, clean and free from grinds. Be careful to tamp consistently and evenly. Remember to always run the group head with water or drop a shot without the portafilter engaged before inserting the portafilter. When the portafilter is inserted, start running the shot immediately. If the water does not begin right away, the coffee will burn. Remember to always heat up your guest's cup before you pull the espresso shot. When serving an espresso to a guest, always serve it with a glass of water. A single espresso is served in an espresso cup, and a double espresso is served in a cappuccino cup. Good luck at serving the perfect espresso. Let's think about troubleshooting. There can always be the case that your espresso does not turn out exactly how you desired it to be. But by knowing how to identify the following problems, we can decipher the specific reasons and then the solutions in order to create the perfect espresso. The first step to creating great coffee is to make sure that your technique is consistent. Problem 1. The first problem could be that the espresso shot is running too slowly. Is it dripping or perhaps trickling into the cup? The reason we will look into here will be one of three previously discussed factors: either the grind, the dose, or the tamp. Let's look at the grind. The reason for this problem could be that the grind is too fine. You can fix this by making the grind more coarse on your grind settings, which means you need to turn the grinder clockwise or to the left. The second reason could be that too much coffee was dosed into the portafilter. This can be fixed by dosing less coffee into the portafilter and taking note of your consistencies. Stick to what works and do it the same every time. Thirdly, it could have something to do with the tamp. You may have tamped too hard, and this can be fixed by taking note of how much pressure should be applied. If this was the problem, you need to tamp with less pressure, and note this, as you can remain consistent for the next coffees that you make. Problem 2. A second problem could be that the espresso shot is running too quickly. Is it gushing or perhaps streaming into the cup? The reasons we will look into here will be of the same three factors: the grind, dose, or tamp. Firstly, the grind. The grind may be too coarse, making it very easy for the water to be pushed through the coffee. You need to fix this by making the grind finer, which can be done by turning the grinder counterclockwise or to the right. Secondly, the dose could be the problem. The dose into the portafilter may have been too little coffee. This is easy to solve by noticing how much should be dosed in order to prevent this from happening again. Consistency is the key. Thirdly, perhaps your tamp was too soft, and hence you will need to dose again and tamp with more pressure. Once you've got it right, note this and keep it consistent every single time. Most importantly, you need to keep your eyes open. The way that the coffee comes out of the espresso machine is always giving you clues as to potential problems. Once you notice a problem, diagnose it by trying to find out if it was a problem with the grind, the dose, or the tamp, and then adjust accordingly. Good luck. Let's look at filter coffee. This particular coffee machine is used to produce filter coffee in a very quick and efficient manner. These machines generally consist of a power base with a water reservoir that holds the cold, fresh water ready for use. Then there is a filter holder, a carafe, and a built-in warming plate. The water comes out of the hose from the reservoir into a perforated disc called the drip area and simply falls through the holes onto the coffee grounds. This liquid is then collected in the pitcher or carafe, and your filter coffee is ready to be served. Let's look at how to set up the automatic drip coffee machine. It's 6 simple steps. Firstly, use freshly ground coffee at a medium grind. Secondly, use a filter that properly fits your machine. You may find it helpful to pour cold water through your filter first to remove any additives or remains that might spoil the next batch of coffee. Step 3. Add about 8.5 grams of ground coffee per cup of water used. Whatever volume of water you use, you must keep it in a consistent ratio. The international standard ratio is 60 grams of ground coffee for every 1 liter of water. Step 4. Add cold, clean, fresh water into the reservoir. Step 5. Allow for the machine to begin its process. Step 6. Once your coffee has brewed, Don't leave it sitting on the hot plate for too long, as it will burn the coffee. Get a thermos to pour your fresh coffee into and enjoy over time. It's very important to keep your drip machine very clean, as this aids in creating your perfect cup of filter coffee. Now let's look at the plunger. The plunger is also known as a coffee bodum, a press pot, a French press, a cafetière, or plunger. This is a simple coffee brewing device that ensures a perfectly delicious cup of coffee. This piece of equipment consists of a glass or plastic beaker, or it is entirely stainless steel. Then it is equipped with a lid and a plunger, with a fine wire or nylon mesh filter attached to it. The preparation and procedure for the coffee press is very simple. Let's have a look at the 6 steps. Step 1. Always try to use a coarser grind, especially compared to those used in the drip coffee machine, when brewing with a coffee press. The longer the brewing time, remember, the coarser the grind needs to be. The use of a coffee press is a very long brewing time, so we need a coarse grind. Step 2. Add roughly 8.5 grams of ground coffee per cup of water used. Add water that is very hot, but just off the boil. Pour the water in steadily. Make sure that you are saturating all the grounds by changing where the water falls. Remember, as with the filter machine, use a ratio of 60 grams of coffee to every 1 liter of water used. Proportion is so important. Step 3. Quickly stir the slurry, or the combination of water or coffee that you have just created. Stirring is optional, but it definitely aids in the complete extraction of flavors. Step 4. Once it has settled, add the plunger with the filter assembly and start counting. For a small pot, a 2 or 3 minute steep time would suit. For the larger model, stick with 4 or 5 minutes of steeping. Step 5. After you have steeped for the desired time, you are now ready to plunge down the filter. Grasp the handle firmly, get a solid grip on the plunger stick, and start by pressing down in an even, slow, controlled manner. Make sure you always keep the plunger rod absolutely straight. If it gets crooked, some of the grounds can escape into the upper portion, which is not what you want. Step 6. When pouring with a press pot, it's a good idea to hold onto the lid so that things don't slide around or accidentally pop out. What the filter would have done is separate the liquid from the grounds, ensuring that you have a wonderful fresh cup of coffee for your guests with no little bits of ground coffee in it. Good luck! This one's interesting. The Stovetop Express Espresso Maker. This one's also called the Moka Pot, the Moka Pot, the Bialetti, or the Stovetop Espresso Maker. This coffee maker is a brilliantly useful little machine which produces coffee by passing hot water pressurized by steam through ground coffee. This contraption consists of 3 parts: a bottom half for the water, a filter funnel for the coffee grounds, and the top half, where the freshly brewed coffee is held. How it works is when the water in the bottom chamber is heated, steam pressure pushes the water through a basket containing the ground coffee into the collecting chamber in the top. There are various sizes and shapes of the Moka Pot, all equally effective in making a stovetop espresso. There are 9 steps to prepare this clever little coffee maker. Step 1. Remove the top part of the espresso maker. Step 2. Remove the filter funnel insert. Step 3. Fill the lower part of the stovetop espresso maker with cold fresh water. Make sure you don't fill past the safety valve. Step 4. Fill the filter funnel with a medium or filter ground coffee. Importantly, don't tamp or compress this. Make sure you keep it level to the top of the basket, ensuring you have a very even layer of coffee in the basket. Step 5. Put the filter funnel back into the lower part of the espresso maker. Now, screw the top part back onto the lower part. Make sure it's nice and firm. Step 7. Place the espresso maker onto the stove top at the high setting. Step 8. Remove the espresso maker from the stove immediately once the top part of the espresso maker is filled with coffee. As soon as you have removed it from the stove, pour immediately into a cup. Don't allow it to